All right, friends. Today I want to talk about this extremely important topic at the moment, and it's this idea of learning to read the terrain. And things have obviously changed in the real estate space, and I think it's really important to adjust to reality at all times. Most of us are trying to get to our goals. We want to get there faster. We want to get there with less risk. And I want to start with a quote that I've been saying for a while now because it's just been so relevant to me. I think the number one reason why we struggle to adjust and to adapt is because of the white knuckling that a lot of us experience inside of our business. No one's really immune to that. But what I will say is that the ideal state for an entrepreneur is calm. When you're calm, you can read the terrain for what it really is. When you're calm, you can see opportunities. When you're calm, you're restrained, you're composed, and it's the ideal state, right? And so, how do we get ourselves to a position of calm? That's the goal, I think, for any entrepreneur. It's not about complacency. It's not about apathy. It's not about sitting still. It's about choosing the mindset you want to bring into every interaction you have in your life with your spouse, with your kids, with your team, and just as importantly, with the businesses that we're all running, right? A calm leader, that's what we're ultimately trying to get to. I want to kind of introduce this term, allegiance capital. This is something that came from one of my coaches I've been working with for the last 3 years or so. His name's Dr. Jeff Spencer. This is an opportunity for me to kind of describe some things that are coming and things that I want you to be aware of as we enter, this conversation that I'm having here. What I find is that in entrepreneurship, there's levels to this, and the people that are at the beginning, let's say level one. Most of the people that are at that level, you can tell that they're at that level because they're looking for the tactic. They're looking for the specific thing that they can do inside their business that will help them get to the level of success that they want. And what I find is the high performers, the people like Charlie Munger and Ray Dalio, these people that we study, they focus a lot more on their decision-making frameworks. I'm going to refer to that as our toolbox. It's the foundational principles, often referred to as like the first principles that we use to make our decisions. Because here's the thing. Yes, tactics are very important, but they're extremely unique to the situation, extremely unique to the person of what they're trying to accomplish. And I like to say, a lot of this stuff exists on YouTube. High performers know how to acquire the skills that they need for next. But here's the thing. Again, another framework that I borrow. I like to say that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, because a lot of this stuff I've learned from my mentors over the years. And I believe this was either Dan Nicholson or maybe Nick Peterson. Somebody introduced this concept of validity versus usefulness, because there's so many valid strategies. They work. Most things work in certain contexts and for certain people. I'll speak maybe to like an off-market wholesaling or flipping company. Direct mail works. Running ads works. Cold calling works. All of these things are valid strategies. But what I've recognized is that as the terrain shifts and changes over time, validity is not what we're after. What we're after is usefulness. How useful is this help you get closer to your goals with the least amount of risk and effort? So what I've noticed about myself and other high performers is that they focus less on tactics and much more on developing their mental models, using first principles to make their decisions. And that's what I have experienced is what separates high performers from the rest of the world, is they invert the thing, right? They don't look at all these tactics and make a decision on which one is best. They get clarity on what they want. They figure out the tactic that's going to help them get there, and then they focus on that thing. Because the tactics do change. The tactics will change constantly. It's about learning the frameworks, because the frameworks don't change. The terrain does. I think that's the real important message I want to communicate here. Now, let's talk about high performers for a second, because high performers, it's not necessarily about the result always. It's about how they show up. And success is not self-perpetuating. Clarity is not an arrival. It's a continuous process. And high performers spend a tremendous amount of time reflecting on how they want to show up, who they want to be, what are the skills they need to develop for next, where am I actually going with all these things, how would I define success? It's something that high performers spend a tremendous amount of time on. It's because clarity is so important, and that's so unique to the individual. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to lean into that, being able to define what you want regardless of what everybody else is telling you that you should want. A great example of this is a lot of people say, I want financial freedom, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean freedom to sit on a beach all day and drink Mai Tais? Is that freedom so that you can, play business like a sport? You can have fun, you can try. Again, it's just so unique to the person, and high performers focus on that. They also show restraint. Dr. Jeff says restraint is the number one word in a champion's vocabulary. As I say, it's restraint not to down that bag of Reese's, Paul. It's restraint to compose yourself, that even when you have the wind at your back and you want to press for more, that you show restraint to make sure that you can handle that next level. It's applicable in so many areas. Because, yes, discipline is very important. They're disciplined. They're restrained in the things that they do. But they're also positioning themselves for readiness. This idea of they're not maxed out at all times. Their calendar is not packed full. Even though they could take that meeting, it'd be really easy to do that. They're restrained because they're putting themselves in a position of readiness. Ready for the next opportunity that comes. Dan Nicholson says something like, every decision we make has an infinite number of trade-offs. So when you choose to opt in to spend your time on something or your money on something, you've eliminated the readiness for the potential other things that are out there. So there's this balance between action and restraint, and high performers spend a lot of time talking about this. They're calm. Again, I believe that that's more of a choice. There's a guy who I really like to read. He was a famous Roman general named Marcus Aurelius. I read a lot of Stoic philosophy type things because that's how I want to show up, is calm and composed regardless of the situation. Good things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. A high performer stays calm through all of it. Much easier said than done, but they focus on these things. High performers are prolific in their output, meaning they actually have something that they're producing at a really high level that has tangible value in the marketplace. Whether that's getting good at underwriting deals or good at leadership, they are prolific in their output. They produce something over and over and over that has high value. I also believe that true high performers are not out to what can I gain from all this. They're true servant leaders. They've identified the client or the person that they want to serve at a high level, and they obsess over how to lead and serve them. They also understand their biases because nobody's perfect. We don't operate in a vacuum. We get tired. We get frustrated. We have these emotions that come up, these things that influence our behavior. I gave this example recently of I'm a very competitive person. And sometimes what that does is causes me, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. It's sometimes I will do something just to try to beat somebody that said that I couldn't, right? And oftentimes doing that, it can get me further away from the things that I actually want. That's a bias. That's something that I've made up in my head that I believe to be true, but just wasn't so. So I think high performers, they spend time really thinking about what influences their behavior, what biases do they have, and it's not about trying to eliminate them. Always. We do want to kind of work on those things. It's just learning how to account for them. There's a human side of all this. It's like Dr. Jeff, I've got this little card here that I'm thinking about. He's got on one side the human mindset and the champion's mind. So the idea here is that just we choose how we show up We don't get to opt out of our biology as humans. We have fear, we have anxieties, we have all these things. But are they real? Is that reality, or is that something that's influencing us because we're human? So we've just got to learn about those things and account for them. And lastly, what I believe is that high performers, they solve problems through their toolbox. They have restraint to process decisions through a toolbox. You hear guys like Charlie Munger. I'm just going to reference those two guys. They're on my mind lately. Charlie Munger and Ray Dalio. There's a reason why Ray Dalio has a book called Principles. Because when he's making decisions, should we do this? Should I hire this person? Should I fire this person? Should I grow my business in this area or try this new marketing campaign? Well, they process those decisions through frameworks and a toolbox of these frameworks that they have. So I highly recommend developing these traits if you're seeking high performance. This is the correct order of operations to go. And again, this takes people time, oftentimes, to move through that level 1 of business into level 2. The chasm there that you have to cross is usually getting your teeth kicked in. You usually have something that knocks you off, and you learn this by default. You learn that business I was running for the last 4 years, all it caused me was stress, anxiety, bad health, and poor relationships, whatever. Because the right order is to get clear on what it is you're actually wanting out of life. The clarity piece is so important. It's so easy and obvious to sit here and talk about it, but in practice, it's so much more difficult. So I don't think any high performers would say that they have this down, because we don't arrive. It's not self-perpetuating. We have to continue this focus on clarity, because we're always changing as people, and the terrain is always changing, right? So again, I can't stress enough how this orientation and this order is so important. The clarity piece has got to be first. The second part of this is certainty. Now, as I've gone forward in my business, I personally don't love that word certainty, because I don't think anything is certain. Nothing is certain. Everything is probable. So what we want to try to do is to get to the goals that we have, to show up the way that we want, as highly likely and as most probable as possible. We want to build businesses that will fund the lifestyle that we want, that will allow us to show up the way that we want. We do these things so we can focus on putting ourselves in a position for what's next. Again, we don't arrive at success. It's a game to be played, not a game to be won. And that's where collapsing time comes in. It's like this idea of these big opportunities. I sometimes refer to that as asymmetric bets. But clarity, certainty, collapse time, that's the right order. And these are three things you're going to want to have. Clarity being probably the most important of it all. If you don't know what you want, what is the Alice in Wonderland quote? Like the Cheshire Cat. If you don't know where you're going, then any direction you head will do, right? So clarity on what we're trying to accomplish. Building this toolbox is what high performers do. They focus less on tactics. They focus more on the guiding principles for their behavior, because they know with that toolbox, they'll be able to select the right tactic or tool to use to help them accomplish their goals. And they're hyper-focused on reality. Your plan is likely to change. Your vision of what you want may not change, but how you get there does, because the terrain is constantly shifting. We are in a very dynamic environment. Nothing is static here. So the skill set becomes having clarity on what you want, developing the tools and the frameworks that are true, because they are true. You've adopted them as your principles and what you're going to use to guide yourself as you navigate and read the terrain. So I highly recommend it. And the barbell strategy that we talk about is how you're going to do it. It's how to get what you want as quickly as possible with the least amount of risk and effort. This is what the barbell strategy looks like. The idea of the middle of the bar being brain damage, that's what contributes to your lack of composure or to not feeling calm. It's the white knuckling that we experience. We want to get things out of the middle of the bar. We want to move it to one side or the other. We start with your sweet spot, with a reliable side, because that's the consistency, that's the certainty that we need to to fund the goals that we have, to be the person that we have. Again, that's the reliable side. And we do that so that we can recapture as much energy, bandwidth, attention, time, all these things so that we can open ourselves up to the infinite potential that we have. That's about creating space, and you can't do that if every second of your day you're white knuckling and firefighting. So the journaling questions that I threw out this week that I would recommend you thinking about, because I'm going to do a series of these videos, but the first thing is getting clarity, as we've said, right? And I think it starts, yes, clarity on how much money do you need and what do you want to buy. That's I think that's fairly surface level stuff. Those things are all achievable. It's important to have clarity on those things, but how you show up for those that matter most to you is probably the most, I would say, most important thing, whether that's your spouse or your kids or your team or your clients. How do you want to show up for them? That's a choice. You can choose calm. You can choose composure. You can choose these things. It's the best state, the ideal state to be in for an entrepreneur. And I want you to also think about what's keeping you from being calm. Are you doing too many things? Are you pressing? You're white knuckling. This is the type of stuff that high performers get really good at identifying. They try to identify the 1 to 2 things that they need to focus on to move the needle forward. So that's what I got for today. And give these journaling questions some thought.